Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to Power at Work. I'm Seth Harris from the Burns Center for Social Change. Welcome to this Power Half Hour live on LinkedIn and published for posterity on poweratwork.us. The Power Half Hour brings you more voices, more news, more analysis about worker power unions and collective action, shoehorned into a mere 30 minutes. Wow, we're good at this. Wow. I've got an expert panel of three guests who I will introduce to you in just a moment. They can't say anything until I do. They just have to sit there and listen to me. I get a kick out of that. I have to be honest with you. They're going to talk about the big stories and big developments of the last few weeks affecting worker power unions and collective action. They'll also talk about some important developments that are coming in the future, down the road, down the pike. They're going to look around the corner, tell us what is coming. And then at the very end, as a laughably inadequate thank you to our guests for being as generous as they could possibly be, they will have an opportunity for shameless plugs and shout outs. They can promote whatever or whoever they want to promote, and self-promotion is just fine with us. Those of you who watch Power at Work often know that that is true. All right, let's meet our panel from downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana. We've got the host of the My Labor Radio podcast and an activist member of the United Auto Workers Union, friend Mark Cavort. How are you, Mark? Good to see you again.
Doing great, Seth. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this panel. We're going to knock it out.
I'm telling you, this is like we raised the bar with this panel. We really did. I have no idea how we got you people to say yes to this. All right. From Cincinnati, Ohio, she's a professor of law at the University of Cincinnati College of Law, a former attorney with the National Labor Relations Board, and most importantly, my friend and co-author, it's Ann LaFaso. Hey, Ann.
Hey, Seth. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. That's the danger of saying yes, is we actually follow through with it. And I believe from Fighting Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Do I have that right? Is that where you are right now?
I'm from Jersey, but I am home in South Philly. First day of the season, Eagles play the Cowboys tonight.
Oh my goodness. Actually, you're from a part of New Jersey that most people are not from. You're from the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, known only to most people because of that Sopranos episode that we all have talked about. But anyway, she's a labor reporter for In These Times magazine. She's a regular labor columnist for Teen Vogue. She's an author and a great friend of Power at Work. Hey, everybody, it's Kim Kelly.
Hello. Go Birds, baby.
All right, let's go to our first topic. Let's start with you, Mark. What was the most important, most interesting, biggest story of the last couple of weeks affecting unions, worker power, and worker collective action?
Well, I think most of America is pretty quiet on this because it's the way they're treating students on campuses that are trying to organize. Now, in August of 2025, Columbia University in New York filed a charge against the Student Workers of Columbia, which is SWC UAW 7210. The university alleged that the union failed to bargain in good faith and tried to put negotiations on Zoom and then brought in kicked out students that were part of the negotiations, but they were negotiating in a cafeteria area or a conference room or something. At any rate, putting a charge like that forward to the NLRB with today's NLRB has a lot of concerns for a lot of people. Also, who wasn't in the mix, but in July of this year, also the National Right to Work people found a PhD student at Cornell University and put him on board or her on board to say, hey, we'll pay you some money. Hey, go ahead and file a charge against your student union too. So I think that's going to be a big thing on the horizon, is how we're changing the look at it. And of course, as the NLRB right now it was a toothless thing for a lot of workers for a lot of years, but now they're really just chewing on gums right now. There's nothing there for it. And I think this is going to be a really telling thing in the future. And I think you've got some background to know about that too, but it's frustrating to watch how they're treating these students now, but it falls on the heels of everything that's going on with Musk and all these other billionaires who are saying that it's unconstitutional to even have an NLRB or an NLRA. So we got to keep our eye on that.
So this is a huge, huge story. And actually, the very next blogcast that we're going to do is going to be talking to the leaders of the College Football Players Association about their efforts to organize.
Right.
But there is a huge threat to the immensely successful graduate student unions and
Mhm.
undergraduate student unions that have
Right.
been organized all across the country. It's one of the most successful organizing efforts. There are a number of unions from the UAW, UE, AFT, SEIU, and others that are organizing. OPIU, I don't want to leave them out, organizing all across the country. And there is a grave risk that the cases that you just mentioned, Mark, and maybe some others that are kicking
Sure.
around, are going to result in the board saying that students cannot be employees covered by the National Labor Relations Act. So I really appreciate your bringing that up.
Great.
And what is the biggest story, most important story, most memorable story around workers, worker power, and unions from the last couple of weeks?
Okay, so Steph, on August 28th, the president issued two executive orders, well, several actually, but two that are relevant here. One was Happy Labor Day. Isn't it great? We have wonderful workers. And it was, also goes on to say how it was the political corruption that got rid of the manufacturing industry and sent it offshore. Not that it was capitalism or free trade or anything like that. But then at the same time, he issues an executive order that extends the ban on collective bargaining to an additional 6 agencies and on so-called national security grounds, and that includes the PTO, the Patent and Trade Office, the National Weather Service, and places like that, and it disenfranchised about 500,000 additional federal workers. Now, this is part of a strategy of repression of union workers in the public sector. So it's also going on at the state level. For example, SB1 has passed over the summer. SB1 is an Ohio state law that now just took effect as we start the school year. And it has really weakened tenure for academics. So this is, again, going with this idea of graduate students. This is also just part of the war on higher education. And if you combine all of this with the labor market, which is weak right now, it's definitely disempowering workers. I will say, though, the more repression, even during eras of repression, that workers will continue to organize, and I think this will backfire, but we'll see.
Well, I agree with you that this is a tremendous story, and there are many facets to it. The attack on federal employee unions, and I've said this before, but I don't think we can say it often enough, is the single biggest act of union busting in the history of the United States. There has never been a time in American history where hundreds of thousands of workers who have been union members and want union representation have been denied their unions, had their unions ripped away from them. Yes, many millions of workers are deprived of the opportunity to organize a union. But here you have folks who organized, who were represented, who were being successful because they were represented, and those unions were ripped away from them. Now, ultimately, I don't know that we know how this case is going to come out. So, Anne, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to put you on the spot. But that's what you do to friends, right? You try to embarrass them publicly if you can. So it was the Fifth Circuit, which is the most reactionary circuit in the country, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, that held that the president was permitted to deprive workers of their collective bargaining rights because of national security reasons. I believe the unions are seeking, I don't know if they're seeking a review by the full court or if they're going to go straight to the Supreme Court. Do you have an educated guess or a prediction about how an appeal might come out?
Well, when I teach constitutional law, I always tell my students that when the government alleges national security, they almost always win.
Yeah.
So to lose in these cases where there's, something like national security, they're going to have to say that that the president is disingenuous somehow. And I don't see this court doing that. That's the problem. So maybe 100 years from now, they'll say, oh, yeah, we made a mistake in Korematsu. kind of like that. We made a mistake here, and that it really wasn't a national security concern. But at the time, I think it's going to be really hard, and we're going to see at least Justice Jackson, probably also Kagan and Sotomayor, have a strong dissent. And it's only if they can get Comey Barrett and Roberts on board that we won't see that happen.
Yeah, it's an act of disrespect not just to the unionized workers, but also to Congress. I mean, it's basically what they're saying. What the courts are saying is that what Congress wrote in the law matters not at all. But they've been saying that all over the place. I mean, there's a whole other conversation to be had, not here on Power at Work, about what the court has been doing to Congress. But Kim, we're here to talk about what's happening to workers. So over the last couple of weeks, what has been the biggest story, the most important story, the most noteworthy story about workers, worker power, and unions in your world?
So obviously there's a lot going on in the US right now, but just like the personal is political, the global is the local. And so the story that has really captured my attention in a big way is what's happening in Italy with the Italian dock workers who have essentially threatened to shut down Europe if this current flotilla, the global Samud flotilla, a flotilla of 20-some boats featuring people from 144 countries that are on their way, hopefully, to try and break the siege in Gaza and bring much needed humanitarian aid, food, medical supplies to the people there who are being starved and bombarded. And these dock workers, I mean, Italians do everything big, right? So the news broke a few days ago. Look, bless them. My mother-in-law's Italian, so I know what I speak. A dock worker made a speech that made some waves a few days ago, saying essentially, if we lose contact with this flotilla for more than 20 minutes, if there's any threat to their safety, we are shutting down Europe. And when a dock worker makes a threat like that, that is not an idle threat. That is a promise. And they have the backing of their union, or the syndicalist sort of cinematic universe that they're part of, the Italians that mix it up like that. And this is not, obviously there's a historical basis for this. Not only have the Italian dock workers and other European dock workers made similar threats and taken similar actions throughout the past couple of years of this war and this genocide. I mean, dock workers in the US have a long history of organizing and shutting down ports for political and humanitarian causes, from dock workers who organized and shut down ports on the West Coast against apartheid South Africa, to more recently actions that have been taken for Black Lives Matter and for more recent political causes here. So it just shows that, this is local. Labor is a global issue. International solidarity is so important right now as workers in every country are under attack. And we need to be sending solidarity from Philly to Palestine, from Congo to Chicago, from Boston to Barcelona. We're all workers and we're all struggling. We all need to be there for one another. And that's really what this is emphasizing.
I got to ask you, because you watch American labor very closely as well as global labor, and you're constantly in contact with folks at the grassroots, not merely union leaders, but folks at the grassroots. Do you foresee any circumstance in which American labor engages in political strikes, political direct action, not merely with respect to foreign policy, but with respect to domestic policy and the relationship with the Trump administration? Because one of our guests last time, our friend Ruben Garcia, talked about the possibility and the discussion around general strike. What is your sense about whether or not there's something similar possible here in the United States?
I think that is not at all a far-fetched idea. I mean, there's a very long history, too, of union workers and unions endorsing and engaging in action, direct action, strike action around political causes. And the fact that we're seeing so many younger and more politically engaged people getting really involved in the movement, from the grad student workers to workers in the service industry, Starbucks United, they're down for whatever. I think there is so, like they're out here. So I think there really is potential for that, especially during this time of great repression, this authoritarian takeover, the government going after workers specifically, from federal workers to coal miners in West Virginia who are being denied the safety of a new silica regulation to protect them from black lung, to just queer and trans workers and immigrant workers who are being targeted for who they are. I think the Trump administration keeps doing these horrible, hugely impactful things that hit so many people. And eventually, there's going to be something, whether it's the attacks of ICE on our communities or the ripping away of just our autonomy and freedom as a people. Something's got to give. There's going to be something that brings in even the most sort of cautious labor leaders into the fold. And I'm really curious to see what that tipping point is going to be. Things are not looking like they're going to get very much better before they get worse.
Yeah, I'm with you. My bet is on ICE invasions of communities as the trigger. Okay, let's get to topic number 2. Guests, get out your binoculars. We're going to look around the corner, down the street, off into the horizon. The question is what, and I'm going to start with you, Anne, on this. What important story or development or event or innovation is coming in the near-term future, not in 2098, but in the next months or years, that our audience needs to know about that relates to worker power and unions?
I think that the issue of whether the NLRA is constitutional is going to go to the Supreme Court. And let me tell you what one way it might come up, which is also part of a recent development. So back in a case called Amazon versus the Teamsters and NLRB, they recently ordered supplemental briefing to address the question about whether the Norris LaGuardia Act is applicable to this.
Okay, wait, you got to explain for our non-lawyer audience what Norris LaGuardia is.
Okay, so Norris LaGuardia removed federal jurisdiction from issuing injunctions. Part of the reason they did that, Congress did this, was because federal courts were abusing the injunctive power to repress union organization. So originally it was the Clayton Act, but then the courts narrowed the Clayton Act, which also removed jurisdiction, too much. And so then Congress went back and said, no, we didn't mean this. It's a broad injunction. And the only time it doesn't work is if there's, violence or property damage, so a crime, then yes, injunctions can come in. Okay, so what happened was the Fifth Circuit, this is what's been the catalyst for this recent case in Amazon. The Fifth Circuit recently held that in SpaceX, this was on August 19th, 2025, that there was, that they could issue an injunction to halt all proceedings at the board because the NLRA is unconstitutional. So we're going back to 1937, Jones and Laughlin, but it's not on the Commerce Clause. It's not on the Commerce Clause. It's on whether or not Section 3, the removal powers of the board members, is in violation of Article 2. Article 2 is the presidential powers. Okay, so does the president have the power to remove at will as opposed to only for cause? Okay, so they said that they rejected the argument that Norris LaGuardia doesn't apply. So that means they could issue the injunction. And then they found it unconstitutional. Okay, so now the Ninth Circuit comes in and says, hey, we want supplemental briefing on this. So we want it specifically on Norris LaGuardia. Does it apply? So now what's interesting here is I think this is a really good way to get to the Supreme Court. And one, does Norris LaGuardia apply at all to this? Or are they going to once again do what they did back in the 20s and go back to repression and say, no, this is really, really narrow. It doesn't matter that they're actually saying that the board is unconstitutionally structured, that it's not just that it does apply to this, as opposed to this is part of a labor dispute. And part of their argument is that it's because it forecloses meaningful judicial review otherwise, which is not true. Okay. Now, I think the next part is then they'll get to the question of whether it's constitutional or not under the board removal powers. And then the next one is, even if it's unconstitutional, can they remove it? The Fifth Circuit did the craziest thing and didn't sever that section, even though there's a severability clause. And for the viewers in your audience, that severability clause means that they can just get rid of the offending portion of the act and say it's still constitutional. So yes, the president can remove it, will, and everything else is okay. This all could have been averted, but they're trying to go. I think they're interviewing for a position on the Supreme Court personally, but they want to get this to the Supreme Court. So that's what I really think something like this is going to happen.
That is huge. So basically what you're saying is that the Supreme Court is going to have to decide whether or not the National Labor Relations Act in its entirety is constitutional, and whether the Norris LaGuardia Act essentially is in effect, meaning courts are not, if they get rid of the Norris LaGuardia Act, courts can get involved and issue injunctions against unions organizing, striking, doing all kinds of activities that they were doing in the 20s that courts used to bust, essentially.
Yeah, they can get rid of both acts, which are so important, in one fell swoop.
Mm-hmm.
That's unbelievable. And let me just say, you were not the person I thought was going to come up with the most unbelievable idea in this blogcast, but you've raised, wow, have you raised the bar? All right, Kim, what is coming down the pike? What's off on the horizon affecting workers, worker power, and unions that you want our audience to know about?
This is a small thing for now, but it's something that I would love to see happen nationwide. New Jersey, Governor Murphy just signed a law basically mandating that labor history, labor education be added to the state curriculum. So now students from grades 6 through 12 will receive instruction about labor history, including strikes and collective bargaining. Our history as working class people. As a Jersey girl, I'm thrilled about this, but I think this just is, it may seem like a small thing, but entire new generations of young people and future workers learning about these things when they're young, before they enter the workforce, and then being able to go into their first job and deal with a jerkwad boss and think, wait, I can do something about this. Someone just like me has already laid out that blueprint. I think that's going to impact people for generations. And that's why I wish we had a federal version. At the very least, if other states took Jersey's lead, I think that would have a really big impact. And as a labor history nerd and someone who's written labor history books, I'm just a huge fan of the whole thing, because knowledge literally is power.
I was just going to say, I hope that they assign your books as part of the curriculum, because I think that would add a lot of value. Let me just say, we did a blogcast with the legislator in Illinois who sponsored the legislation that also requires education, not merely in labor history, but also in sort of unions and what workers' rights these students will have once they enter into the workforce. We also had Bob Bruno, our friend from the University of Illinois labor program, participate in that. So there are a couple of states that have moved in this direction, but I'm with you. I think we need it absolutely everywhere in the country. I must say, I'm a little nervous about what labor history in some states would look like. Maybe it wouldn't come out exactly right. I'm not sure I want them writing the curriculum. If there's a way to link labor history and creationism, that's what we might end up with. But I'm with you. I think that's a big story. Mark,
yes.
What's coming down the pike, Mark? What do we all need to know about that's off in the future that we should be thinking about?
Well, I always like to remind union members that are not being affected by any of these things as far as getting bargaining rights taken away from them, that your comfort today isn't going to last. This will affect you, and the work that's being done against these federal workers, even our rail workers. Look at what they're talking about with Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern joining together and how awesome it'll be. No, they're going to reduce workers. They're going to get more East Palestine, Ohio type of accidents that will happen. But the big thing for me is when they're AFGE, American Federal Government Employees Union.
American Federation of Government Employees.
Thank you. when they filed in Northern California against these executive orders that Trump brought forward, they got some ground traction and some things are moving, but it's a small victory there. It's not really a victory either because it's got a long haul. But these attacks and the wide berth that the current VA administrators said nobody has it, they're going to drop another 30,000 people at the end of the year out of the VA system right now. These attacks on government, whether it's a local municipality to your state, to these federal government employees, because they can attack them, it will happen to you. Once this thing that Ann has just talked about, which is real monumental, coupled with all the other executive orders, the things they're doing, you're next on the menu, folks. Don't think you're not. You have to be involved. And that goes on the heels of all the people who have talked about general strike. I think that is a real big thing. And we're going to be forced, if not painted, into that corner as working Americans to have to step forward from that. And we're going to ask our non-union brothers and sisters to step out with us because that's the only way that type of thing is going to work when we all withhold our labor. This is going to be a very tumultuous year to finish, but then into 26, it's going to get even worse. It's an election year. There's a bunch of things going on there. My concern is don't be comfortable as a union member now. Step out of your comfort zone and take a hit. You got to join.
Yeah, I will tell you, I had conversations with a bunch of union political directors and others around the election.
Yeah.
And, they were telling me about their conversations with union members who were voting for Trump, even though they knew that Trump was anti-union. And what the union members said was, well, yeah, the government's not going to be with us, but the union will always be here to protect me, right? And the answer is no, there's no guarantee. The only way that unions survive is if union members rally around and are activists and take to the streets to support their unions. And to talking about taking to the streets, there's no connection at all to what I'm going to do next. It's topic number 3. We've arrived at shameless plugs and shout outs. Each guest will get about 1 minute to plug or shout out anything or anyone they would like, including themselves in their own projects. Kim Kelly, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
The Young Readers edition of my book, Fight Like Hell, came out a couple months ago. It's called Fight to Win, Heroes of American Labor, for ages a precocious 8 up to like 14 or so. So it's got you covered for a lot of different ages. I hope people pick it up and read it because you got to get them young. And I think it's pretty good.
I think it's fantastic. I think it should be taught in every school in New Jersey. Let me just say, not just in the Pine Barrens. Okay, Mark Gavart, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
I appreciate all the work that our panelists do every day. I also work at making sure that we try and get information and interviews with people on My Labor Radio. Just search any podcast platform for My Labor Radio. And I'm so proud of the most recent one I did called Strike While the Needle is Hot. A record collector from justseeds.org, Josh McPhee, along with Kennedy Block, who is a researcher, put this fantastic book together about how it was to press records for your strike event that happened or your upheaval or your convention, whatever it was, that there was some amazing things that happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s to put these records together. They have an amazing collection of it. commonnotions.org has that book available. It's on my podcast where I talk to them in the most recent lineup there. You'll see it. And I'm just very proud of the work that those guys did. And I'm a geek for that kind of stuff. Kim, you will love this because they break it down on the pages and it's just the most amazing stuff. So I'm very proud of the work that these folks have done. On behalf of folks, it's a great labor history piece.
Hey, everybody, go subscribe to My Labor Radio. Mark's work is just fantastic. It's my second favorite labor podcast available right now. It's absolutely a close number 2. Ann LaFaso, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
Okay, so my book with 2 of my co-authors, Jeff Hirsch from UNC and Joe Slater from Toledo. It's called Mastering Labor Law. It's going to come out in January or February. We updated the entire thing, and it's the public sector and the private sector with all the updates. I'm really excited about it. It's written at the level of, I would say, you could be a college student and read it, and an educated person. So it's not written just for law people, and it really explains the law in a very simple manner. I also want to shout out the musicians who are workers because they're always forgotten that they are actually workers. And I just went to a conference of labor organizers and musicians, and they asked me to spread the word. So I'm going to spread the word about that. And one more thing, Seth, you are also my co-author on another book, and we're about to update that one, and then I'll give you a shout out.
Well, thank you very much, because I'm going to do absolutely no work on the next edition of that book, because I've done no work on it in quite some time. They're very generous to keep my name on the book, but I haven't done any real work. I really never did any real work on that book. Let's be honest. I was just sort of the face. I was the face of the project.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to shamelessly shout out. I'm going to shamelessly plug two things. First, Power Half Hour is changing our schedule. Yes, you heard it here first on Power Half Hour. We are changing our schedule beginning Tuesday, September 16th. The Power Half Hour will be live on LinkedIn and published for posterity every other Tuesday instead of Thursday. We're moving from Thursdays to Tuesdays. That's Power at Work's regular broadcast spot. So we decided to move the Power Half Hour into our mainstream of programming. So look out for that September 16th, Tuesday, for the Power Half Hour noon, live on LinkedIn and then on the Power at Work blog later on. Second, you can learn about schedule changes like the one I just announced by subscribing to Power at Work. Go to poweratwork.us. A subscription box will pop up. If it doesn't, go to the bottom of the front page. The subscription box is there. All we ask for is your name and your email address. We promise you we're not going to sell or give away that information. We will use it to keep you updated about the latest content on Power at Work. Everything that we're doing. We'll send you a weekly newsletter as well as the weekly download, which is a collection of a couple of dozen great things from across the internet relating to workers, worker power, and unions. You will appreciate being subscribed to Power at Work because it doesn't require anything. You just give us your name and your email address, and then everything else shows up in your inbox. For Anne-Marie LaFaso, Kim Kelly, Mark DeVart, and our producer and Power at Work co-op, Anushka Srinivasan, thank you so much for joining us on the Power Half Hour. We'll see you back on Power at Work again very soon.
Public professionals, would you like to learn how data, digital innovation, and AI skills can improve your work and help you serve your constituents better? The answer is Innovate US. Innovate US offers no-cost learning on the skills you need to succeed in government in the 21st century. Attend a 1-hour weekly workshop or enroll in a course on AI or human-centered design at your own pace. It's all free to you. Visit innovate-us.org today to learn more and sign up. That's Innovate-US. Visit right now.